So, what's going on guys, Kaid here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the new best 25 million DPS HAILEY build that will one-shot the bosses in literally 2 to 3 seconds. Like you can see from the gameplay, you will spend more time walking to the boss than actually shooting him. So if you're interested in this build, then in this guide I will show you what weapons and modules you want to get. Then I will explain every single skill and show you the best reactor and external components. And then lastly, we will take a closer look at the gameplay and weapon mods, so you would know the reason behind every single build choice, and what exactly will give us this insane one-shot damage, and much more. If this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So our new HAILEY one-shot build is insanely powerful, because we will use a specific module setup that in combination with just one single weapon will completely destroy any enemy that you come across. The only thing that you need to know is that our HAILEY skills will scale off our sniper's 80k, so we want to increase it as high as humanly possible. And then by activating the Cold Fury, Storm Snare and then finally the Zenith skill, we will do insane amount of damage. By doing this we will utilize all of our buffs and achieve anywhere from few million to up to 25 million DPS per hit, depending on how geared your character is. So then with that said, now let's take a look at our modules. For the first one we have the mid-air maneuvering. This modifies the grappling hook to be cast mid-air, however it can be only used once, and charge time is increased by 20%, but most importantly this will increase our max module capacity by plus 20. Then increased HP, which increases our max HP by plus 22%. Then emergency measures, which increases the skill critical hit rate by plus 16% and skill critical hit damage by plus 7%. Then chill specialist, which increases our chill skill power by plus 20%. Then spear and shield, that increases our defense by plus 22% and skill power modifier by plus 8%. Then the front lines, that increases the skill critical hit damage by plus 16% and skill critical hit rate by plus 7%. Then skill concentration, which increases skill critical hit damage by plus 14%. Then dangerous ambush, which when landing a skill attack while the enemy is not targeting you, the skill power is increased by plus 6%. But if you attack an enemy if he is immobilized, then your skill power is increased twice that amount, so by plus 12%. Then maximize conversion, which reduces skill cost by minus 9% and skill power modifier by minus 5%. And finally the glacial Synxium, which increases critical hit resistance by plus 4% and chill skill power by plus 3%. So overall our main goal with this setup is to get as much crit chance and chill skill power as possible. So then by activating the Cold Fury, Storm Snare and finally the Zenith skill, all of this will give us massive amounts of damage buffs and activate our modules so we would get this crazy one-shot damage. Then next up let's take a look at the best weapons and weapon mods that we should use. I will show you 2 different sniper setups. Both of them are great, but usually players just choose one sniper build and then a secondary weapon like the Thunder Cage or anything else for close quarter fighting. So then for the first weapon we have the Piercing Light Sniper. This is the best sniper rifle for HAILEY, because it has the highest base firearm 80k in the game. This is very important, because HAILEY skills will scale off the weapon's 80k, so you could use any other weapon, but it will deal less damage, because other weapons have lower 80ks. And then for the modules, we want to get the Action and Reaction, which increases our 80k by plus 15% and Recoil by plus 5%. Then Weak Point Expansion, that on weak point hit will increase our weak point damage by plus 35%, but this has a 20-second cooldown. Then Concentration Priority, which increases critical hit damage by plus 8% and decreases reload time modifier by minus 8%. Then Better Insight, which increases critical hit rate by plus 8%. Then Weak Point Sight, that increases weak point damage by plus 10% but reduces accuracy by minus 5%. Then Concentration Stabilizer, for reduced recoil by minus 8% and increased critical hit damage by plus 5%. Then Focus Fire, for increased weak point damage by plus 5% and critical hit damage by plus 4%. Then Better Concentration, for increased critical hit damage by plus 19%. Then Rifling Reinforcement, for increased 80k by plus 12%. And finally the Inside Focus, for increased critical hit rate by plus 5%. and critical hit damage by plus 3%. With these mods, like for most weapons, we focus on increasing our damage, and because of our insane buffs from the rest of the setup, we focus on as much crit and 80k damage as possible. And then finally, for our second weapon of choice, we have the afterglow sword sniper rifle. On hitting a weak point, this weapon will inflict the unique effect called the death propagation, which increases our critical hit rate, and because of our setup, this is 100% guaranteed. And we want to use modules like the weak point sight that increases weak point damage by plus 10%, but decreases accuracy by minus 5%. Then better insight, which increases critical hit rate by plus 10%. Then fatal critical, that increases critical hit damage by plus 5% and critical hit rate by plus 1%. Then strengthened first shot, that after you reload, your first shot gets 100% 80k increase. Then action and reaction, that increases 80k by plus 15% and recoil by plus 5%. Then better concentration, or increased critical hit damage by plus 9%. And finally the focus on fire, that increases fire skill power by plus 19% and decreases skill cooldowns by minus 6%. As any sniper weapon, we want to increase our crits and overall damage, so with our mod setup, we have made it that you can basically crit the enemies 100% of the time. And as I mentioned at the start, so you want to choose any of these two sniper setups that you like the most and use it for your build. Then next up, let's go over to the best reactor and external components. So your reactor is very important item that determines your skill damage and can also include extra modifiers that buff certain aspects of your build. I recommend prioritizing using reactor with the highest skill power and a sub attack power. Specifically, my best job that I got is this frozen paste reactor with a piercing light condition, which is yet another reason for our high damage. And then for your external components, they're even more of an RNG, at least until you've played the game for long enough to find every single possible combination with a good stat roll. For our build specifically, I recommend to use the full 4-piece set of the Slayer. This Slayer set's 2-piece effect is to give us plus 8% increased round capacity. And then for the full 4 set, we will get plus 9% additional rounds per magazine, and plus 15% and plus 26% for skill cost and skill power. And as our build pretty much is built around our skills, so this is a massive damage buff. And then finally, let's take a quick look at our skills and when we should use them. So the first passive skill is called a Safe Strategic Retreat. This will increase our firearm weak point damage when our character is further away from the enemies, but decreases when we approach them. So very similar like the Sharon, we always want to keep a distance between us and the enemy. Then our first active skill is the Cryo Rounds, which fires a cryogenic round at the enemies in front to deal damage and inflict cryo. Enemies inflicted with the cryo will receive additional damage from the firearm 80k. Then the second one is the Storm Snare, which fires a glacial beam at the enemy to deal powerful damage and inflict cryo. This will also inflict knockback and flash freezing to the nearby enemies. Then next up we have the Cold Fury, which grants Cold Fury to our build. This effect gradually stacks the more our movement speed decreases and critical hit rate for our skills and weapon increases. We also become immune to knockdown while the effect is active. And finally we have the Descendant. This will give us a unique sniper rifle. When hitting an enemy with this unique weapon, we will deal additional chill skill damage with greatly increased penetration. We also will recover a portion of our MP upon successfully attacking a weak point, and this will particularly decrease our cooldown when the skill ends depending on the number of fired bullets. And then in my final summary, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, what we want to do is be simply far away from the enemy, and then activate the Cold Fury, Storm Snare, and then finally the Zenith skill. And if you're using the right weapons and module setup, then you will do this insane damage. And that's about it. So with that said, I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or suggestions, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and not miss any more amazing content. With that said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy, peace.